So today I'm going to be talking about, are you a good fit, identifying your best opportunities in the data science job market. We're going to look at the categories of data science jobs and help identify them from job descriptions, and then talk a little bit about how you can frame previous work and skills that you have maybe in another area or a previous career to fit within the data science job market. Just to kind of look at my personal journey, as Anna said, I'm started out at Yammer, which was acquired by Microsoft. I was first a product analyst, and then at Microsoft we were called data scientists. Then I became the first hire at an ed tech company called InCDU, the first data hire, and I was the head of that team. So I was the director of data. We then got acquired by Chegg, and so I was then a senior data scientist at Chegg. Had hired, I was an intelligence manager, and now I'm at Slack, and I'm a senior analytics developer. And so job titles vary a lot in tech. I'm one example of that. I'm the same person, the same-ish job at 6 companies with 6 different job titles. And you'll see a lot of different job titles when looking for data type jobs. So I've highlighted a few of them here, and it can be confusing to understand, well, what do these different job titles mean, and which one am I the best fit for? So I think about data science in 5 main categories, and we're going to go into those categories and what they mean. Those categories are data analyst, data engineer, data architect, domain expert, and management. Now, some jobs will have you require multiple of these categories to do the job, but it's good if you can kind of frame yourself into one or more of these categories so you can focus on where you want to, what type of jobs you want to look for. So a data analyst is someone who is coming more from a sciencey or researchy background. They're interested in exploring data and deriving insights from it. They're comfortable with communication and working cross-functionally with partners in other parts of the organization. They're going to be answering questions using analysis of data, performing experiments like A/B testing, creating models and forecasts, helping to prioritize and work with others within the company around which analyses they should do, and what is going to be the most actionable and valuable work for them to do within the data organization. And they will help people in the organization make data-driven decisions. So this is more of the track that I am on. I do much more of the data analysis and data modeling than the data engineering and data architecture track. But there have been jobs that I've had in the past where there was no data engineers on the team, and so I was doing some of the data architecture and data engineering as well. But people from science backgrounds, especially people who have worked with large data sets as part of their academic or schooling, tend to be more in the analyst category. Also, people from like consulting backgrounds often will be analysts. So the skills that you would want to highlight if you're going out for a more analyst type position, SQL is usually the most important language to know if you're going to go into data science. It's what I spend, I would say, like 80% of my analysis is working in SQL. Statistics, so being able to do modeling or testing or understanding error analysis with your data sets. Often you'll also want to know a scripting language like Python or R, and then be able to take complex data sets and reduce them, analyze them, model, visualize the data. But there's also a lot of the softer skills like decision making, prioritization, project management, and communication. And I often find that people who are breaking into data science will really focus on their technical skills, but the communication piece is just as important, if not more important. And so often if it's your first job as a data scientist, you might not have a ton of on-the-job experience with SQL or with databases, but you do have a lot of communication, project management, or visualization experience that you can highlight. And so that's something to think about when applying for jobs, is to make sure you have that balance of both the harder technical skills, but also the soft skills. So the next category is a data engineer, and it can also be called an analytics engineer or a data analytics engineer. So this would be primarily somebody who is coming from a more computer science or computer engineering background, and wants to focus more on data and go more towards the data science, but they have that engineering base. What data engineers do is they'll often be building tools for the company to visualize, analyze, and share data. They'll be building the systems that run experiments and testing. They'll be working with product engineers and architects to make sure that the right things are being logged and collected in a way that's easily analyzable. They'll create systems that allow analysts to work at scale quickly, and those can be ETL systems or data pipelines. And they'll work with architects and operations engineers to ensure that data is organized for optimal analysis. Now, often the data engineer category is coupled with the data architect, and that's the same person, but at larger organizations, they'll actually be separate. And so the data engineer is much more kind of doing the tool building and engineering of some layers on top of the data to make it easy to analyze and distribute results within the organization, whereas the architect will be doing much more of the like pipelining and reduction of data in ETL systems. So for a data engineer, the skills that are useful to have are, again, SQL, but also to have a really strong background in programming and full stack software engineering. So a lot of data engineers will come from product or development engineering background and then want to specialize more in data. They also should be strong at data visualization and tool building, cleansing data, understanding the pathway from raw data to driving insights, database management, data structures, communication, because they're going to be translating the needs of the analyst to building something for them, and statistics. The next category is data architect or an ETL engineer. So again, this is often coupled with a data engineer, but sometimes they're separate roles. And I would say that the architect and ETL engineer is much more working within the raw data logs and pipelines and building out reduced tables. So for instance, I work at Slack. We have a log that will fire every time a user starts up the app and say information about that process. Perhaps I want to know on a given day how many users have opened the app, but I don't need to know all of the processes that are fired. I don't really care if they've opened the app once or 50 times. So the data architect would build a pipeline that would create a reduced table of the number of users that have opened the app on a given day, and so that I can just query that table instead of having to go in the raw logs, which are slower and harder to query. So being able to collect the requirements from me about what type of reduced table I might want and how I would use it, and then design that and create jobs that will regularly run that reduction, that's something that an ETL engineer or a data architect would do. A data engineer would do something like build a tooling on top of that reduced table so that I can easily access it or share that data or visualize it. So they're going to design systems to get raw data into analyzable tables, organize tables, optimize data sets for efficient analysis, create ETL pipelines, and often they're organizing data from multiple sources. So you might have some data from your web product, you might have some data from mobile, you might have some data from your Salesforce instance, and we want it all unified in one place. And that would be something that the data architect would work on. So this again is like a more technical role, and usually people come to this from a software engineering or operations or development background. So you're going to want to be stronger in back-end engineering, but also have experience cleansing data with designing databases, optimizing data, modeling, and with ETL systems. We use Airflow and Kafka here. It's Slack, but there's a lot of other systems as well. And then often you're going to need to be working in distributed databases, whereas not all of the analysts will necessarily be working in distributed databases. It depends on how big your data set is. Here at Slack, I need to know that because we have really big data sets, but at previous companies that I've been at that are smaller, I haven't had to work with distributed databases as an analyst. The next category is domain expert. So these are often jobs that are specialized in a particular flavor of data science. So you'll see something like machine learning expert or natural language processing expert, search engineer or search data scientist, classification, people analytics, algorithms, operations, supply chain, vision. There's a ton of these categories. And I don't have time to go into each of these specializations, but I should say that often you are expected to have an advanced degree or significant experience in this area of expertise. So if you are coming from a PhD program where you've done natural language processing, then you would be qualified for a natural language processing data science job. And you could use that as previous experience in terms of work experience. But if you haven't done that before, then they probably won't want you for that role unless they're willing to take someone with little or no work experience. So I didn't have any experience in machine learning or natural language processing or search before I started working as a data scientist, and so I started doing projects in these areas while being a more general data analyst at organizations, and then beefing up those skills. So I would recommend that if that's something that you're interested in, but you don't have a ton of experience, that you go out for a more general data science or data analyst position, and then try to work on projects that will allow you to specialize and partner with experts within the organization who can teach you these best practices. There are also a lot of ways to try to learn these skills through online courses or projects through like Kaggle or other organizations. So, but most people would not consider coursework as actual industry experience. And often in these specialized data science roles, they want people who have previously worked have industry experience or academic research experience in these specializations. So the domain, you can think of a domain expert as someone who is like a general analyst, but has a lot of the skills of the data analyst, but is specialized in one area and is working in a more focused piece of data science. So at Slack, we have a team called the Search Learning and Intelligence team. They are data scientists, but they're really focused on our search feature and optimizing that feature. And so they're doing machine learning, natural language processing, and search optimization. And we tend to hire people who have worked on those types of problems before. The last category is management, and I don't know how much detail I should go into this because this conference is aimed at people who are looking for their first data science role, and I would not recommend going into a management position as your first role in data science. But in general, managers, they're going to be managing a team of other data scientists or data engineers, creating kind of a vision for how a company will use data, implementing best practices for data engineering and data science within the organization, providing both technical and leadership support for the team, promoting, communicating, and advocating for your team's work, growing and mentoring your team, and implementing processes for the team to work effectively and efficiently. And to be eligible for a management position, someone should have all of the technical skills of a data scientist or a data engineer, but on top of that, have additional skills in recruiting, strategy, communication, motivation, conflict resolution, prioritization, influence, vision, decisiveness, teaching, coaching, mentoring. So I have had managers who have had a lot of management experience and had never managed an analytics or data science team before. And so sometimes that's possible, but I do think that the best data science managers need to be able to support people with the technical side as well. And so if you are someone breaking into data science for the first time and you have a lot of previous management experience, I would recommend spending some time as an individual contributor to beef up those technical skills before you start managing a team. These are the main categories again, and I like to think of kind of clustering the data engineer and the data architect as like a data engineering cluster, and the analyst and domain expert in the data science cluster, and then management is kind of the layer on top of that. Now, in terms of seniority levels, I just wanted to highlight what are often people mean when they use different words in job descriptions. So often when people use the word analyst, like data analyst, business analyst, product analyst, they are talking about a more junior data scientist. So this person will often, these roles often don't require an advanced degree, and they don't require a ton of programming, and they won't necessarily have any machine learning or natural language processing aspects. These types of roles are a really good way to break in, especially if you don't have any advanced degrees. And often, but if you are wanting to become a full stack data scientist, you're going to want to make sure that there are opportunities on that team to start learning those other skills, learning how to program, learning how to do more advanced machine learning, natural language processing, and other domain specific skills. But I think a lot of people ignore job searches for the roles that use analysts because they don't really think of that as being the same as data scientists. But a lot of companies, it does mean something similar. So for instance, at Slack, I am on the analytics team, and roles on my team are analysts and can be people who do more specialized data science work. So then the next kind of category is data scientist, data engineer, or a senior analyst. So this usually requires an advanced degree or significant work experience. It often requires a lot of knowledge of statistics, experimental design, A/B testing, and programming. So you can think of that as kind of an analyst with a few more years of experience and more technical skills. Then there's a senior data scientist or engineer. Usually these require 3 years of experience in industry working as a data scientist. And often they want someone who is in a similar industry. So working on web products, working on mobile products, working in retail, working in business to business. It is rare to get hired in a senior data science position as your first data science job, even if you have significant work experience in another industry or in another role, or you have an advanced degree or coming from academia. And so while you can go out for those roles, probably what will happen is if they hire you, they will bring you in at a data science level, because the expectations of a senior data scientist are usually that you have some industry experience. A staff data scientist or staff data engineer. A staff is often the word that's used for the most senior individual contributor on a team. So you're not managing anyone, but you do have a lot of experience. You've been working in industry for a long time. You're taking on really large projects. You're able to be a technical lead for a large project. Those types of roles would not be something that you could jump into as your first role. A lead data scientist or engineer usually involves both individual contributor work and management work. And so you would be heading a team, but you would also, it would be a smaller team, so you would also be doing your own individual contributor work. And then there are titles that are like data science manager, director of data science, VP of data science, head of data science, head of data engineering. Those tend to be roles that are purely management. So you will be managing a large team. You're often managing other managers. Usually this requires previous management experience, and you'll be doing less of your own analytics individual work. So I think this group of people is probably going to be going after the data product business analyst or data scientist, data engineer, senior analyst level of roles, unless you have like a lot of previous work experience. So now we're going to go into a couple job descriptions and just try to kind of highlight the skills that they're looking for. And I'm just going to go through my mindset when I'm looking at a job description and trying to think about how I would apply for a job and tune my resume so that I'm a strong applicant for the role. So this is a job opening on my team, senior analyst, data analytics at Slack. And I've highlighted kind of the key experience things that we are looking for. So first, they're looking for experienced analysts. And so that means that we want somebody who has some data analysis experience in their work history. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have worked as an analyst at a tech company before, but we want people who have had jobs where they're analyzing data and have worked in using those skills professionally. The team is called an analytics team, and it's useful to think about often analytics teams have a slightly different flavor than data science teams. So data science teams will usually have more of the specialization or domain expert flavor versus being a general group of people that are generally using data to solve problems. So on the analytics team at Slack, for instance, we are pairing with the product managers to help them make decisions about what new features we should have at Slack. We're debugging problems with the user experience and highlighting things that are broken to the engineers to fix. We're helping marketing target the right people to bring new customers onto Slack. We're helping our sales team decide what deals they should focus on for upgrading teams from free to paid. So we're working across functionally, and it's very applied of like helping people make decisions. Whereas our search, learning and intelligence team is a more specialized flavor of data science, where they're working on our search algorithm, and they're building things to be integrated into the Slack product, and to improve the user experience by surfacing more relevant search results. So they're having kind of a more focused set of work that they're doing, but it's similar. They're using data, they're using programming, they're using statistics, they're using modeling. They're just using it to solve this one area of search and natural language processing, whereas we're using these to do broader strategic decision making. So sometimes that can be framed more as analytics or product data science, marketing data science. So it can be telling you like which division you're working within versus like machine learning or natural language processing expert. You're probably working on a specific feature that's being integrated into the product. Okay, so talking about the team, they're looking to grow the success of the product. So this should highlight to you that we want somebody who understands Slack as a product and has some product experience or product sense. It's amazing how many people show up to interviews and they haven't done a thorough investigation of the product. They don't know all the features, they don't know the business model, they haven't used a product. This happens less at Slack because it's a pretty popular product, but at previous companies I've worked at, I've interviewed people who really it was obvious that they had never used the product. So make sure before you go into an interview, especially if you're going to be working on the product, that you familiarized yourself with the various aspects of the product. Deep technical skills. So if you are submitting a resume for this role, you would want to highlight as many technical skills as possible, because that's something that's been requested here. Maybe you don't have the experience with SQL or with Python explicitly, but you are really good at Excel, or you've done some other technical work through some other type of role. So make sure to highlight those, because that's something that we're looking for in the right candidate. Also working with data infrastructure as well as analysis. So anything that you can do to highlight ways that you've not only analyzed data, but also organized it, processed it, made it run more efficiently. Anything you can talk about with like management of data would be really beneficial. Identify and monitor an impact on key metrics. So often interviews for data science jobs will involve trying to come up with a metric or determine how you would measure the impact of some change or some experiment. So here we're saying we want you to understand about metrics, and you might want to think about the type of metrics that Slack would be interested in, and prepare those before the interview. And if you've ever done anything where you've had to measure things or come up with a system for determining success in a previous role, you should highlight that. Independent, excited, and wanting to have a big impact. So that can be demonstrated in a lot of ways through like previous leadership, ways that you've taken initiative, ways that you've gone above and beyond, whether that be a volunteer project that you did or being the captain of a sporting team. So anything that kind of shows that you're somebody who takes initiative is good to highlight to show those skills. Okay, so the responsibilities, use data to inform and influence direction of the product team roadmap and inform business decisions. So, this paragraph says not only would you be working with the product team, but you'd also be working with marketing. and data engineering. So that helps you understand that this role is cross-functional and works with a bunch of different teams. So anything that you can highlight in your previous experience of how you've worked with a lot of different partners, maybe people who are more technical than you, less technical than you, and the ways that you've bridged those relationships and been able to communicate to people at all different levels. Define goals, again, with key metrics, designing experiments. We don't, often people who haven't worked in data science haven't done A/B testing, but anything where you have experience with designing a experiment or coming up with a hypothesis and a way to test that would be useful. Visualizations and automated dashboards. So any experience you have with visualization tools would be useful to highlight as well. So under requirements, so bachelor's degree in computer science, engineering, or related field, or equivalent training. So this is cool. Like, this basically doesn't exclude anybody based on their education. You don't have to have a graduate degree. You don't even have to have a bachelor's degree, just some sort of training that gives you some technical background. A proven track record of using quantitative analysis to impact key business or product decisions. So this makes it seem like you probably need to have worked in industry before. But even if you have a track record of using quantitative analysis for a project or for in a different context, that would be good to highlight. Effective communication. So anytime, if you've given a talk ever, if you've taught a class ever, if you've written a paper or written a blog, like, those are things to highlight there, because communication is a big part of this role, and especially communicating cross-functionally. 6 years experience writing production data sets in SQL Hive or building internal production system tools for ETL experimentation or exploration in a scripting language. So again, this makes it seem like we want somebody with 6 years of experience using SQL, which many of you don't have. But also doing data exploration using a scripting language works as well. And I think if you are also doing like really sophisticated analyses in Excel, that would probably be okay too, especially if you had some strategy or business background that could supplement that. But this is the piece that is the most senior part of the job, and it would make me pause if I were a more junior data person. That's 6 years experience. But that 6 years experience could be working in another role where you had a data aspect to it, or it could be being in a graduate program or doing a bunch of coursework and projects on the side. So anything that you can say that demonstrates that this is something that you're passionate about and you've worked on it in different settings would really help. Strong grasp of statistical applications and methods. So this tells me that probably the interview will have a statistical and math component. So if you see something like that, you should be prepared to do some math and stats in your interview. And if you're not brushed up on that, you probably should. Comfort with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So again, wanting people with some technical background and some background with building websites. Academic and or professional experience in a quantitative field. So we're open to people with either or. You don't have to have an professional experience as a data scientist, but just in some quantitative field or an academic experience. And experience in software engineering is a plus. So you've come from a software engineering background, but you've done a bunch of data related projects and you want to go more deeply into data science or data analytics. Yeah, so that's the way I kind of like go through and look at this this job description, I try to just literally highlight the skills and then think about the things that I have in my background that could demonstrate these skills. I want to make sure I leave time for questions, so I'm going to go through this next one a little bit quicker. This is an ETL engineer. I got this role off of Kaggle's job website. So this is much more in the data engineering, data architecture category. But they don't need someone with a ton of experience, which is pretty cool. Just 1 to 2 years of experience doing some sort of either data analysis or software engineering. So they want somebody who is familiar with ETL processes and will maintain their ETL in Hive, Scala, or R. So that's something that is a little bit hard to do if you're not working with a large set of data that needs an ETL system on top of it. But yeah, if you can like do a project or do some sort of online course that gives you access to a large data set, this could be something that you could try to teach yourself. Or if you're working as a engineer at another company or a data person at another company and you want to go more towards the data engineering, you could try to seek out some experience with using ETL systems. You're going to monitor production data using Oozie. I've never used Oozie, but I would definitely check out that tool since it's something that they would like you to know for this job. Translate technical and business jargon. So that's a communication piece. So again, even though this is a data engineering, data architect role, they do want someone who can communicate. So want to highlight that in your resume. Good SQL skills, knowing at least one programming language, analytical thinking. So anything that can highlight these in your resume, a bachelor's in computer science or software engineering. So I would assume that the person who went into this role is someone who already has some experience as an engineer, more on the computer science side, and they want to go more towards data science and data analytics. And so this would be a good role to kind of transition more that way and specialize on data. But you don't have to be a senior engineer. You could have 1 or 2 years of experience. Okay, I have another one that I highlighted, but I want us to have time for questions, so I'm going to move on. So normally when I give this talk, I highlight it towards people who came from academia because that's my background. I came from a PhD program and then went into data science. So these are a lot of skills that scientists and academics have that they can highlight in their resumes and in interviews for data science jobs that are really applicable. But I think they're applicable for people coming from other backgrounds too. Also, there's a couple graphics I have here of the type of skills that are considered data scientist skills. So I would just go through these 2 slides and see how many of these skills do I have experience with, how can I get more experience with the types of skills, how can I highlight or frame my previous experience in this framework so that I am, people who are reviewing my resume can see like, okay, yeah, she has these types of experiences, or he worked in this area, but that's similar to the type of work that he would do as a data scientist. So the language is important because often, like, in physics, we might call something one way, and in data and science, it's another thing, and kind of translating your previous experience to use a similar language as the job description will help a lot. This is another cool set of skills, just like all the different technical skills. It doesn't really highlight as much of the softer skills, but a bunch of things that you could highlight or work on knowing. So the final slide is just kind of going through my resume and explaining what I try to do to make it the most relevant to a job. So the first thing that I want to highlight, which I didn't realize before I started interviewing and recruiting people, is that employers and recruiters will often spend less than a minute scanning a resume. And so you really want to be able to pull out the most important stuff right away. So I recommend highlighting your most relevant work at the very top. And I summarize it in a skills section, which says, like, this is my experience with data, programming, visualization, management. These are the tools I have. And it's all very concise. So someone can just like scan that really quickly. I also put my education up there because like having a PhD from Berkeley is one of the more impressive accomplishments I have. And so I put that at the top. But maybe there's like an award or some other thing that's you're really proud of that you want to highlight at the very top of your resume. So that's something to put up there too. So what you want to do is you want to give your resume to someone for a minute and have them scan it and then take it away and ask them what they remember. And want to make sure that whatever that person remembers are the things that you want to highlight about yourself. So next, I would highlight elements of your previous experience which are irrelevant to the current job and use similar wording. So I outlined those in blue here, but like if they say A/B testing in the job application, then put that in directly into your work experience. Even if you like try to frame something that you've done that could be framed as A/B testing, or highlight a project that you've done that involves A/B testing. And then also make sure that you discuss your soft skills, not just your technical skills. So things like communication, project management, process implementation, recruiting. And then be explicit as you can about the outcomes of projects, the specific tools you use, the years of experience. So I say, you know, I've done data science for 10 years. I have, you know, I supervised 5 people. I did this change, increased revenue by 20%. So anything you can do that really quantifies what your impact is, what your experience is, will, you know, not only show that you're an analytical thinker, but also help people understand what seniority you are and how relevant your skills are to the role. So I have a few more resources. I have a blog where I've written a lot about advice on how to transition to data science, interview tips, my experience, so check that out. There's also some online courses here. I really recommend going to meetups and networking. It's a great way to meet people in the industry, find out who's hiring, get advice about how to break in, get connected with people for projects and internships. And then there's also a lot of organizations where you can get hands-on experience by volunteering, like Code for America and Data for Democracy. So that's the end of my talk, but I'm open for questions now.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. So we have a bunch of questions that have come in. I'm going to start with one of the most popular, which is, how important is it to meet all or most of the requirements in a job posting? And then they noted that they've heard requirements are often targeted at dream candidates and that no one meets all the requirements. Is that true?
Yeah, so usually there's been a study that women tend to apply for jobs if they meet all of the requirements, whereas men will apply for them if they meet 70% of the requirements. So at least you only need to meet 70% of the requirements. And it really varies from company to company on how are in their description of the job. So for instance, like I don't know JavaScript or HTML. That's a requirement on this job description from Slack, but I don't have those requirements and that's not been an issue. So my advice is like, it's not your job to reject yourself, it's their job to reject you. If you think that you're qualified for a job, there's no harm, or even, 15% qualified for a job, there's no harm in putting yourself out there. And if they don't think that you have the requirements, then they won't interview you. So I would over apply versus under applying. Just don't mislead anyone about what your skills you have, but you don't have to have every single requirement in order to apply for a job.
Great. I love that way of thinking about it, not rejecting yourself, but letting them reject you. So another couple of questions came in kind of regarding academia. One of them is that a PhD in the right field often counts towards domain expertise in a profile, but can a PhD with lots of data analysis also count towards previous data analysis experience?
Sorry, the sound cut off for a second. You said, can a PhD with lots of data experience count towards their previous experience?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And so, when I was first applying for data science jobs, I said that I had 5 years of data experience. And I think that that is totally fine because I had a very quantitative PhD where I was doing analysis day in and day out and working with complex data sets. Just again, be explicit about what that experience is. So if you are working with sets of data, but it's maybe 1,000 data points instead of 20 million, or not using databases, but you're using some, flat files and importing them into Python, don't be misleading in your description or in your interview about what experience you have. People understand that that not everybody has access to huge data sets as big as you will have at a big company, and they don't necessarily expect someone to have that experience. But if you say you have that experience and then you don't, then that will be worse than just saying, hey, these are the things I have done and this is how it's relevant. And I'm excited to learn and fill in the gaps.
Great. So in your talk, you mentioned advanced degrees a few times. And just to kind of clarify what you mean by that, what would you count as an advanced degree? Is that just a PhD? Does that include a master's?
Yeah, so advanced degree is anything beyond a bachelor's. So a master's, a business degree, a law degree, a PhD, anything where you're specializing further than just your bachelor's degree.
Great. And then we have a question about, your background and how it's helped in your career, specifically your physics background.
Yeah, so I studied physics for all of my degrees. My PhD was using a large set of data from a telescope, so millions and millions of objects that were images of the sky, and trying to constrain information about the large scale structure of the universe by doing statistical analyses of these millions of objects. So it was actually very similar to the work I do as a data scientist. In one case, I had these files with millions and millions of stars and galaxies. Now I have data with millions and millions of people doing stuff on a website. But it was reducing the data, cleaning it up, doing stuff in Python, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand what it all meant. So a lot of the skills were very similar: the statistics skills, problem solving skills, data skills. I would say that my team at Slack has a lot of people from a wide variety of backgrounds. So we have PhDs from math, science. We have people from business school and from consulting backgrounds. We have people who were software engineers. We have people who just have worked in industry and have kind of built up their skill set by working as analysts and then moving up to be more senior. Everyone has a slightly different lens based on their training. And I think that as a physicist, we learn to put the information we have into a specific mindset and model, and approach classification of data in a particular way. It's not necessarily better or worse than any other way, but it is a particular lens. And so one of the things that I've appreciated since moving into industry is learning other approaches and other frameworks for thinking about problems. It's been great to just interact with people from a wide variety of backgrounds, because before I mostly interacted with people with the same set of tools and the same language and the same thought process. But in general, like astrophysicists, physicists, and economists, mathematicians, statisticians, people who have worked with math and data and modeling, it's a quite smooth transition to go into data science because it's a lot of the same types of day-to-day work.
Right. And I guess that's where, good communication comes into play, and just being able to translate your academic experience into kind of comparable experience for the role that you're interviewing for.
Yeah.
So we have a question about opportunities for people that are not CS majors and they're trying to switch into kind of a data science field. So you went over, different types of roles and different clusters of roles. Kind of where do you see the best opportunity for people without CS trying to move into data science roles?
Yeah, so I think if you don't have a CS background, you want to go out for those like business analyst roles on teams that have more senior people who can help you learn the programming and more technical and statistical skills. So for instance, at Hired, I had a woman on my team who she came in, she had come in from a like more sales analyst role, and then she came onto our team as a business analyst and then started doing more product analytics. She then moved, she learned how to code. She started taking Python classes. She was working in SQL. She started doing testing, and then she was able to leverage that into a data science position at her next company. And so I think for me, at least, I learned best by hands-on, like on the job, doing things that are applied with other people. And so if you can get on a team where you can learn on the job and you can kind of beef up your skills that way, great. Otherwise, I mean, there's a lot of online courses. Kaggle, of course, has like tons of opportunities to play with data sets and try to teach yourself. But yeah, some of those volunteer opportunities that I highlighted are ways to interact with more senior people who are more established and can help teach you and guide you, and get you those skills so that you can get into the data science realm.
Cool. And there's a follow-up question to that, which is recruiters tell a lot of people that they're looking for someone with more production experience. Do you have any recommendations for, how can you get production experience if you haven't had a job, pushing code into production?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's two approaches there. So the first is like kind of dig into the recruiter, like what are the skills that they want that are demonstrated through having production experience. So for instance, like maybe they want you to be able to collaborate on code using Git, or maybe they want you to understand how to do unit testing, or maybe they want you to be able to merge your ideas in with others. And if there's any way that you can like say like, well, okay, I haven't worked on a website before, but I have done this project where I was collaborating on code with people, or I know all this about unit testing, or hey, look at this like side project I did where I did put some stuff into my own website into production. So just trying to understand like what they actually mean by that would be helpful. And then the other thing is to try to start getting that experience through volunteer projects or hackathons or doing your own side project. So anything where you can add to your portfolio and be like, okay, yes, I haven't worked as a data scientist in industry, but look at all of these things I've done that demonstrate these skills that I know you want. There are more jobs right now for data people than there are people to hire, especially at a senior level. And so like people are willing to bend their requirements a bit for the right candidate if you can prove that you're dedicated and if you are a quick learner and passionate about what you're doing. So just be creative and try to figure out how you can fill in those gaps.
And I know we're coming up on time, so I have one more question. That was a pretty hot question. It's a little unrelated to exactly what we've been talking about, but we have a lot of people dialing in from kind of all over the world, and people want to know, is it common to have remote data science roles? And also kind of how would you view those? Is that like a different type of opportunity? Is there a different kind of skill set to present?
Yeah, so often data roles are collaborative, and so you're working cross-functionally, you're having to partner with other people within the organization. And so it's more challenging to do that remotely, especially if there's huge time differences, because you aren't necessarily lined up to even VC with people. I have been at organizations where we've had remote data people, but they tend to be more doing those kind of like specialized expert roles. So they're working on like a confined project where it's like, I am doing search for the product, or I am doing this thing for the product. And so it's a little bit less general where they need to talk to a bunch of people all the time. And they also tended to have a lot more previous experience. I think it's a lot easier to be a remote person in general if you've already sort of demonstrated that you can do the role in person and that you're accountable and, you know, can self-motivated. So I think having it be your first job would be tricky unless it's an entirely remote company.
Great.
Yeah, so that